The criticism from world leaders has been furious and the warnings severe after a commercial flight over Belarus was diverted to Minsk so a dissident journalist could be arrested. The government there has been accused of hijack, piracy and even state-sponsored terrorism. European Union leaders have agreed to a series of restrictions on Belarusian flights and airspace, along with plans for strict new sanctions.
There was no bomb on board the Ryanair flight that was diverted to Minsk. The sniffer dogs found nothing. But there was a journalist, Roman Protasevich, and he knew immediately why the aircraft had been forced to land in Belarus.
When they announced that the plane is going to be landed in Minsk, he jumped from his seat. He went into a little panic. He said, "What is going on? I can't land in Minsk. I can't land over there. You know, I'm going to get the death penalty. I'm going to be killed."
This was the last photo taken of Protasevich before he boarded the flight in Athens. Nothing was heard of him for 24 hours. And then this video was released from his prison.
My name is Roman Protasevich. Yesterday, I was detained by Belarusian police at the airport. Now, I'm in Minsk Police Station 1. I can say that I don't have any health problems with my heart or any other organs. I'm being treated with respect and according to the law. Right now, I continue to cooperate with police and confess to organising mass protests in Minsk.
When Flight 4978 finally landed in Lithuania late on Sunday evening, 5 of the original passengers were missing. Roman Protasevich, his girlfriend, and 3 others. It's thought they were Belarusian KGB officers.
I'm sure that he's been tortured because he knows a lot of information. He was a leader of one famous Telegram channel about civil society, about the situation in Belarus.
Roman Protasevich has to be released immediately, and we will put pressure on the regime as long as it finally respects the freedom of media and the freedom of press and the freedom of opinion.
Lithuania has told its citizens to leave Belarus for their own safety. Speculation about Russian involvement hasn't been confirmed, but Presidents Putin and Lukashenko are reportedly due to meet later this week. The Belarusian leader has few allies now.
Joining us for more on this live in the Perth studio is the aviation editor at the West Australian newspaper, Geoff Thomas. Geoff, good to see you. Thank you for your time. This is quite a fascinating and bizarre story. There's been this furious sense of outrage from EU leaders in particular. The global aviation industry is also understandably pretty upset. What happens from here?
Look, it's set an incredibly dangerous precedent, whereas it appears as though a state, Belarus, has hijacked an aeroplane, taken a dissident off it, and a couple of other people. All of a sudden, all the airlines of the world, overflying all sorts of territory, Russia, Iran, Syria, all sorts of air routes are now question marks, because what happens if you've got somebody on board that this particular country wants? Are they going to try the same thing? So it's sending alarm bells everywhere. It's almost akin to, but not quite obviously, a missile shoot down. All of a sudden it's not safe to fly over a country because, you know, with the MH17 it was shot down, now we've had it hijacked. So it sets a very, very dangerous precedent, and I think the reaction is certainly justified and it has to be very forceful.
Because we are really talking about state-sponsored hijacking here, aren't we? And so when you look at that, I mean, what are the rules here? What powers does a country have over their airspace, and what powers do airlines have to try and avoid that situation?
Well, the rules are countries grant you overfly rights and they get paid. They get paid in US dollars, which is why, for instance, Iran is one of the most cooperative countries there is, because they want the US dollars. So yes, the US dollars are the big attraction, and so they grant overfly rights, and you are allowed to overfly and you will not be touched. That's the rule. So all of a sudden you've got a hijacking, or in the case of Ukraine we had a shoot down. This rings major alarm bells.
Okay, closer to home, none of us are going to be flying over Belarus anytime soon, I wouldn't have thought.
Right.
Or anywhere close to that region. Here at home, we're talking about just wanting to get on planes to travel interstate when there are border restrictions, and the big idea at the moment is this vaccination passport.
Yeah.
Is this a good idea? It's pretty controversial in some quarters.
Look, it is controversial, but the reality is we're seeing all across the globe massive blowouts in COVID-19. We've had the India situation. We've now got it in Malaysia. Japan's out of control again. So we've got these flare-ups everywhere. The only way to protect yourself is to have the vaccination. I've had the Zeneca one, and that's what you've got to do. And we go back in time, 20, 30 years ago. When you travelled overseas, you had a vaccination passport. You had a passport and a vaccination passport. And in that vaccination passport would be up to 7 injections. And you simply couldn't travel unless you had them. We have to go back to that. And I think the government has to, because we've got a lag on people wanting to get vaccinated because of concerns. This has to be the carrot to say, look, we're not going to allow you to fly overseas unless you're vaccinated. We've got to start using incentives to get people to be vaccinated. And the other issue is countries on your air route, like Singapore, you want to go to Europe and via Singapore or Dubai, they're going to be saying, unless you're vaccinated, you're not coming through. Even in transit, you're not coming through.
And the technology at these airports all around the world, if we all start having these vaccination passports, I mean, there have been questions raised about black markets starting up. Can you trust vaccination passports coming from other countries? I mean, you'd think they'd be pretty all over that in terms of the technology, especially at these key hubs.
At the key hubs, they are absolutely getting on top of it. And also, we now have British Airways trialling a new COVID test, which takes approximately 2 minutes. So I believe down the track, it's going to be, yes, you've got to have a vaccine passport, and also you're going to have a COVID test when you get to the airport as well. And that is going to enable opening up of international travel, either bubbles or corridors. And it's going to be the double protection, because people on board the aircraft want to know that everybody on board is vaccinated and is COVID-19 free.
So whose job will that be to do? I mean, talking about airlines, the airports, government?
Well, it's going to be a cost of one kind or another. Probably the government's going to foot part of the bill, but eventually, like we do with various charges at airports, the passenger will foot the bill in the end.
Virgin Australia's CEO, as we all know, raised a few eyebrows and created many headlines last week. These comments about opening up the borders. Some people will need to die, essentially. We did see her try to tone down some of that language. What has the fallout been? I saw there was a push for boycotts of Virgin Australia.
Yes, there has been a bit of anti-Virgin sentiment out there. My understanding, the reality is it hasn't really impacted on business at all. And Jane has certainly said, look, I didn't explain myself properly. But the reality is Qantas has been pushing very, very hard for quite a few months for all the borders to be open. International borders to be open. They wanted it to be October. And everybody then said, well, that's way too early. We know it's way too early, but they wanted to push for that. So in a de facto way, they've been doing the same sort of thing. And airlines all around the world have been desperate to get borders open so they can get flying, get their people employed, their aeroplanes flying again. So yes, there is that risk. And sadly, it's a risk we're going to have to live with.
Yeah, look, I think she was saying something that a lot of people have been thinking, but perhaps it could have been handled a little bit better.
Sure.
Geoffrey Thomas, appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.